Welcome to the DroidDevCast, a podcast brought to you by the team at Esper, bringing you the latest news, thoughtful discussion, and insights into all things Android, Android DevOps, and open source software development. I'm your host, Rin Oliver, Content Marketing Manager at Esper, and today I'm joined by Chris Stirrat, Vice President of Customer Success at Esper. We're here this week to discuss all things customer obsession. Specifically, what does it mean to be customer obsessed? And why does this key focal point often get glossed over by companies? To wrap up the show, we're going to dive into how Esper approaches customer obsession and what it takes to truly make your customers feel valued, respected, and appreciated. So with that said, let's get started. Chris, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. So, Chris, in your own words, what would you define as the ideal customer experience in the Android and MDM space?
The way I think about it is really, if you think about what a customer's trying to do, they've typically got a solution, devices are part of it, there's an application that's part of it, and they're really trying to provide a bunch of value to their own customers. And so when I think about an ideal customer experience for our customers, it's how do we make that very easy for them to, A, get their devices provisioned, deployed, useful for their customers? How do we help them keep their applications up to date? And make sure that their full solution is really delighting their own customers. So it's really, we're kind of one step removed from their customers, but we need to make sure that they're able to provide a perfect solution to their customers.
Great. That sounds good. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Finding that perfect solution is ideal. And what are some things that sales and marketing teams can do to ensure that they're focusing on not only acquiring customers, but nurturing their relationships with their existing customer base that they have already?
So in this space, the thing I've learned dealing with our own customers is there is a kind of the initial sale. And this is, you've got the customers are pretty excited about what we can provide value-wise, how easy it is to use what we have, and how it can make them successful. But then once you get over that kind of initial hump, you're going to want to provision out a bunch of devices. So one key thing that we've learned is we need to continually check in with customers. So they'll initially provision usually a proof of concept, maybe 10, 15 devices, but their solution is really going to be thousands of devices. And so how do they get from that provisioning, the initial proof of concept provisioning to a full fleet deployment? And so checking in with them periodically, I think, is key, both from a sales and marketing standpoint and a customer success standpoint, so that we make sure that we're in tune with them. Are they running into issues? Are there issues out of their control, like a device manufacturer, COVID hits and it slows down manufacturing? And just kind of working through those types of situations, making sure that we're providing all the expertise we can to the situation. But again, it's really about checking in periodically, making sure that customers are having the ability to roll things out and they're able to be successful in what they're doing.
I agree completely. And what do you consider key to being proactive when it comes to customer service and creating that wow experience? What do you think makes it really special for customers when they're interacting with a business, especially in the cloud-based services?
Yeah, so this is pretty interesting, especially in our space, because we're dealing with a bunch of different types of devices. Sure, they're all running Android, and we focus 100% on Android devices, but there's many different device manufacturers. There's many different versions of Android. There's AOSP, there's GMS certified devices. And so one thing that we can do to be proactive is really trying to find problems before a customer does. So for example, if we're able to, so we know that maybe the Android 11 update is coming. And so some customers, if they're using GMS devices and they're more consumer-based devices that they're using, the update will actually be controlled by maybe their mobile data provider. And so understanding, what does it mean when we go to Android 11 and the customer's fleet of devices automatically gets updated via their carrier? What does that really mean? Is their app going to be ready? What changes are happening in the different versions of the OS? So for us, getting ahead of those types of things, understanding what are the changes in Android, how will it affect the typical customer applications, making sure customers are aware of those early. That's huge to really find these types of issues or potential problems first. So staying kind of ahead of the game there. The other thing is really just monitoring our solution. So if we see via our own monitoring of our cloud, where devices are continually updating their status and things like that with our cloud, and seeing certain devices having, a pattern of issues or something we've seen before, being able to proactively alert the customer, make sure that they understand this is going on. Maybe it's a set of devices that are running out of battery power. And we've seen this in a couple different customers where a device will run out of battery power. And the reason being is the charging or docking station that they were using was broken. And so for them, the customer will say, hey, the customer will complain that their own customer will complain that the device doesn't work. And these are typically not super technical end users. And so for them, the device just quit working. If we can, preemptively say, hey, by the way, we've seen 10 devices, run out of battery, where typically, the other 2,000 in your fleet have not. We can alert them to those particular devices. We can tell them where they're located, things like that, so that they can, proactively address the situation before the customer sees just a dead device. So there's things that we can do there, and we've gotten much better at it over the last, year, 9 months to a year, as we see different patterns out there, and we can learn from those patterns and make sure that we, apply those same patterns to many different customer situations.
Touching on that cloud-based scenario a little bit, can you tell us a little bit more how Esper handles those cloud-based alerts and alerting in general in the cloud?
Yeah. So alerting is really there to allow you to manage a large fleet of devices. So if you've got 1,000 devices out in the wild and you don't have hands-on access to any of the devices, maybe they're all in an Uber or a taxi or at different restaurants or whatever your scenario is, you can't physically touch these devices. So you need a way for these devices to report back to you when something is going wrong. And we call that alerting. And basically it's a way for you to, you can't check in with 1,000 devices. It's impossible. So you really just want to know where the anomalies are. You want to know which devices are having problems. And alerts can be as simple as I lost my Wi-Fi connection or I lost my cellular connection. It can be that my battery drained. It can be many different things. And over time, we started with a very base set of alerts in the product. And we've learned through customers, there's a bunch of different scenarios that they'd actually like to track. And there's some of them are fairly sophisticated. So just for one example, if a device goes out of, say, cellular range for whatever reason, they wanted us to wait for a certain amount of time. In this case, that it was a 2-minute. If it went out off network for 2 minutes, they wanted us to toggle airplane mode on and off and that typically would re-wake up the device and it would get back on its own mobile network. And they found that was super effective. And so again, things that we learned from customers to being able to provide functionality to allow them to specify, I need an alert when it goes out of network coverage. I want a timer started. And at a 2-minute period, I want to be able to toggle the airplane mode on and off. And so there's many different types of alerts, and we are continually learning different things that people want to do there, depending on the situations. But it's very key because you're really managing by anomaly at that point in time when you have that many devices.
Wonderful. That sounds great. That makes a lot of sense, actually. And so switching gears a bit, let's talk about how Esper approaches customer obsession. What's your favorite thing that we practice here at Esper that you feel really helps make our customers feel valued and enables them to be successful?
So there's two related things that come to mind. First, the company was set up that way. The founders of the company actually put customer obsession in as the core tenets of the company when they first set it up. And it's something that we hire for and that, we try and live with throughout the company. It's not just one group that's involved, it's everybody. And being initially a small startup, and as we're growing, you can see it in many different parts of the company where people really take delighting a customer very seriously. And in our space, the situation that we typically run into is we have customers that have a great business, they have a great business model, and some of them want to add devices to it because they want to reach out to an audience. Maybe they want to do it in a kind of a touchless way, especially recently with COVID. There's been some new scenarios where people want to use a device for interaction as opposed to human interaction. And not all of them are Android experts, and not all of them have ever deployed devices before. And so we find ourselves many times helping customers debug their own applications because we do offer Android expertise. By nature of our company, we're deeply experts on Android and all things Android. And so we provide a lot of additional help, support, whatever to make customers successful beyond our own software. And it's something that I see all the time. There'll be something clearly that's not even something related to us, but we'll dive in, we'll try and help. We'll help contact the hardware vendor for them if they need that, to make sure that we understand, what's going on there, or help go through crash logs, many different things like that. And so I think, it started initially with the founders. They really put it right in the core tenets of the company. And then I think through hiring and through just, watching people's example of how far we'll actually go to help a customer be successful. It's contagious and it's been really successful.
That sounds great. And were you able to give me any specific scenarios of when we've actually done that for a customer, like gone into their logs, et cetera, and tried to help them resolve an issue?
Yeah. We have a large customer that is deploying devices in Ubers, taxis, Lyfts, and they deploy them in the backseat of the car so that the passenger has some entertainment as they're riding in the car. And they have a great business model. They focus a lot on the advertising that'll happen there and getting people to advertise, provide content, things like that for these devices. But they don't have a ton of expertise around the devices themselves. So they were seeing some connectivity issues where they would have these devices deployed in taxi cabs and they would lose connectivity. And they couldn't figure out what was going on. And they were doing some, basic testing of their own where they'd put two devices and in the same car, and then they see which, did both of them lose connectivity at the same time. We were able to help them instrument some of their applications so that as they lost connectivity, we could get a bunch of information back from the device. And then a lot of times we saw that the device was crashing. And part of it is their application was written in such a way that it didn't handle losing network connectivity very elegantly. So it would crash, which actually was useful to us because it helped us spot the problem. So we take the crash logs from them. They'd send them to us. We do an analysis of them. And we found a couple areas, and they were using a customized version of Android. And there was, a couple areas inside there that were problematic. There was a couple libraries that they were using were conflicting, and we were able to point that out, and they were able to correct that issue. But again, that had really nothing to do with the Esper software running on there, but it did have a lot to do with the customer being successful.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a great example. I love that we helped that customer out. And speaking about customers, how are we analyzing customer data here at Esper? Is there anything you'd like to see us focus on in the future as we continue to strive for a data-driven, customer-centric experience?
Yeah. So one thing that we've started doing right now is when we think about the typical kind of flow of a customer interacting with us at the beginning and then kind of taking them through rolling out a large fleet of devices, we call it provisioning. Provisioning is basically taking a device, a stock device, putting the Esper software on it, putting it under management, configuring the device the way you need it as a customer, the different settings, the different permissions, things like that. And we call that all provisioning the device. And so we've implemented recently a way for us to track every time when any customer's provisioning a device and it fails, we actually get notification. We actually use Slack, and we get some information back on a Slack channel that we can watch to see, one, just the fact that they're having problems, so we can proactively reach out and help them debug it. But we also get enough information to be able to typically figure out what's going on. And why did the provisioning fail? Was it that they had, if it's a GMS device and they were trying to load a Google app as part of that, their credentials were wrong for the Google Play Store or whatever. But having that type of instrumentation so that we can proactively help them get over that hump, because sometimes if they're not Android savvy, it'll be a little bit daunting to try and debug that on your own. And so having that instrumentation, it's fairly basic, but it's a way for us to quickly and proactively seek out the people that are provisioning their devices and having issues. And so that's one, small example. I think moving forward, there's a couple areas I'd love us to get more information. And that's really in the workflow through our console. So we have a UI console, and it's kind of everything to everybody right now. So it's a single console. It's typically used by developers. So if I'm developing an application and for my Android devices for my company, I'll use it there because that's how I'm going to distribute my application. I'm going to update versions. I'm going to do all that type of thing. In addition, my operations staff will also use the same console to monitor the devices, to troubleshoot them, to see the alerts coming in on them. And there's kind of two different personas. And so I'd really like to instrument our UI a little bit so that we can see what areas are people actually using and how do they flow through the UI, and is it a good experience? Are they having to click way too many times to accomplish a small thing? And did we anticipate the workflows that they're actually doing? And so some instrumentation there, I think, would go a long ways and to help us really understand and streamline the experiences for the different personas.
Fantastic. That sounds great. Thank you so much. That was wonderful insight. And lastly, what are some key takeaways you'd like to offer our listeners who might be hoping for some tips on how to approach customer obsession from a marketing and sales standpoint? And how can they make sure they're providing their customers with a great experience?
I think for me, one of the key things getting into this space is this space is different than other ones I've been in. And we have a lot deeper relationships with customers in this space. And I think that one key learning that I've taken away is you really need to understand what they're trying to accomplish. And so, for a user to provide a full solution that includes applications running on devices, usually a backend, they have their own cloud solution that they're, transacting, or they're capturing data or pushing content or whatever they're doing. But understanding that whole continuum to figure out how does Esper help in that situation? What are the types of things that we can do to really help them in those situations? And it's different from, I've worked in server software, cloud on the back end side and things like that, where the customer was way different. A lot of times we dealt with developers and building out, enterprise applications and things like that. And you really had to understand what their problem set was. And so I would say the key thing is really to make sure you actually understand what your customers are trying to accomplish and, figure out how you can add value to that situation. And I think that gearing your messaging, gearing your, any of your collateral, your content that you're providing, podcasts, videos, everything around that is super helpful. Because if you think about, when I think about my life and I'm trying to do something, maybe I'm trying to fix something on my car or I did recently changed a battery in my car. First thing I did is I went on YouTube and looked up a video of somebody doing it and kind of walking you through it. And so being able to understand what customers are trying to do, provide that type of content that is, on point for what they're trying to do, I think is super helpful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the DroidDevCast. We'll be back next week with another exciting show for you. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode on social media. You can also follow us on Twitter at EsperDev and subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep up with all the latest happenings here at Esper. You can listen to the DroidDevCast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Simplecast, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you again for listening, and we hope you have a wonderful week.